You'll probably get some form of the bedsheet ghost if you ask anybody in your life to quickly sketch a ghost for you. There are a few eyeballs or eye holes, and it is round on top and wavy on the bottom. There may also be a mouth if they're feeling very adorable. Or, if the ghost emoji has just inspired you, a tongue. For millennia, the idea of ghosts appearing as white sheets has been ingrained in our culture, and up until recently, it was seen as really scary. Prior to quite recently, the majority of Western European societies routinely buried departed people's remains wrapped in a white fabric known as a burial shroud or winding cloth. A shroud and a coffin were typically used to encase the affluent. On the other side, those in poverty were frequently laid to rest in just a shroud, without even a coffin. This representation of a ghost from the Psalter of Robert de Lisle, which was written somewhere between 1308 and 1340, shows how ghosts were frequently shown as skeletons wrapped in their shrouds throughout the 1300s. In The Three Living and the Three Dead, 3 ghosts or corpses warn 3 noblemen to live righteous lives or perish. Do you think the addition of the maggots is tasteful? By the 1400s, witnesses to paranormal events nearly universally portrayed the apparitions as wearing funeral shrouds. By that time, this portrayal had become so generally accepted that a whole group of English burglars started dressing as ghosts and robbing people. These zombie disguises served the dual purposes of concealing the robbers' actual identities and frightening their prey into parting with cash. The population continued to believe that sad souls were roaming the earth dressed in their burial shrouds even after several ghost impersonators were uncovered by the government over a long period of time. It became typical for individuals in England throughout the early modern period, which spanned from around 1450 to roughly 1750, to describe seeing apparitions wrapped in shrouds because so many people were interred in shrouds. During this time, robbers in England sometimes donned white sheets to mimic ghosts in order to terrify people and take their money. As early as the 16th century, ghost impersonation appears to have been a fairly frequent occupation for criminals in England. The Discovery of Witchcraft, written by English witchcraft expert Reginald Scott, was published in 1584. In Book 7, Chapter 15, Scott wrote, "But certainly one knave in a white sheet hath cozened I deceived and abused many thousands that way, especially when Robin Goodfellow kept such a coil in the country. But you shall understand that these bugs specially are spied and feared by sick folk, children, women, and cowards, which through weakness of mind and body are shaken with vain dreams and continual fear." Obviously, Scott was alluding to the act of impersonating a ghost. Therefore, it would appear that some individuals were already disguising themselves as ghosts by wearing white blankets in Shakespeare's day. Even while there was a picture of a ghost at the time, it was by no means the most well-known. Ghosts were frequently shown in plays from the 15th and 16th centuries wearing armor rather than shrouds. It is quite likely that the spirit of Hamlet's father would have been shown in armor in the original performance of Shakespeare's Hamlet. This implies that the subject of how the silhouetted ghost got to be the most recognizable must still be addressed. The so-called Hammersmith ghost was one of the most well-known of all recorded apparitions in England during the early 19th century. Beginning in November 1803, a number of residents of the Hammersmith neighborhood in the west of the English capital city of London started alleging that they had been assaulted by the ghost of a man who had committed suicide and been buried in the Hammersmith graveyard the year before. Several people who said they had seen the ghost described it as being extremely tall and cloaked in white. Other accounts describe the ghost as a terrifying apparition with glass eyes and horns on its head that resembled a guy dressed in calfskin. But no matter how the ghost was presented, it was always portrayed as a terrifying entity. The entire city was seized by fear of the purported ghost. Because there was no established police force in London at the time, locals formed hunts to go in search of the ghost. A 29-year-old excise officer named Francis Smith, who had gone out in search of the ghost on January 4, 1804, mistook Thomas Millwood, a bricklayer who was clad entirely in white, for the ghost. Smith fatally shot Millwood, believing that he was now face to face with the most dreaded ghoul in all of London. This unintentional shooting sparked a highly publicized trial. Because the fact that Smith had mistaken Millwood for the ghost on account of his white attire was essential to the trial, a considerable deal of emphasis was drawn to the precise description of the ghost as being clad in a white shroud. As a result, despite conflicting accounts of the ghost, the description of the Hammersmith ghost as a towering person shrouded in white rapidly came to be accepted as accurate. An iconic illustration published in the magazine Kirby's Wonderful and Scientific Museum in 1804 depicts the Hammersmith ghost as a man dressed in a billowy white shroud, with its arms raised in the air above its head, floating just above the ground. The artwork represents the ghost staring straight ahead, with a vacant expression on its face and its mouth gaping slightly. One can only imagine how scary it would be to encounter such an apparition in real life. In the end, a shoemaker from Hammersmith named John Graham acknowledged that he had created the entire Ghost of Hammersmith hoax to frighten people. That is to say, the ghost whose tales had so alarmed the populace and even caused the unjustified death of a man turned revealed to be a fabrication from the start. Nevertheless, the legend of the Hammersmith ghost persisted, and strangely, approximately 20 years later, people started sharing tales about how Thomas Millwood's furious ghost allegedly haunted the Hammersmith neighborhood where he had been shot and died. One Missouri newspaper asked its readers whether they believed in ghosts and spirits in 1889. J. W. Wills, a reader, wrote in to share his experience with two ghost sightings. He stated that one of them was a huge white thing with long horns that he would have shot if he had been carrying his weapon. Professor B. F. Heaton, another reader, came in to explain that although some scholars acknowledge that there are black ghosts, they are nearly always white. However, I should point out that the real ghost always wears white and always initially manifests itself at the haunted location at precisely midnight 12 o'clock. Theatrical depictions of ghosts and hauntings throughout the 19th and into the early 20th century added to these notions. The variety of on-stage ghosts was immense, ranging from straightforward portrayals of players wearing white face paint or armor to trickery using mirrors and trapdoors. Theater experts felt that plain-clothed performers portraying ghosts were better able to win over audiences. Therefore, ghosts dressed in white sheets were more frightful. Additionally, such picture was used to portray spirits in Victorian spirit photography, a practice that persisted until the 1930s. By the conclusion of the golden age of spirit photography, bedsheet ghosts may have taken on the status of a lighthearted joke, but it was children's cartoons that ran wild with the fun factor. Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and Goofy play a ghost hunting squad hired by Disney to rid a house of ghosts in the 8-minute cartoon The Lonesome Ghosts, which was first published in 1937. The cartoon ghosts have expressive expressions, translucent bodies, and caps. However, it was obvious that their baggy costumes, which included capes, were made of sheets. It was a unique component that gave ghosts from the past a sweet new spin. The first significant sign that ghosts had changed culturally was Casper the Friendly Ghost's appearance in 1939. In a 1957 Popeye cartoon, the sailor is shown eating spinach to kill a group of spirits aboard a haunted ship. Olive Oil finished the episode by stitching the ghost's shrouds into a massive sail. Scooby-Doo and the crew started to expose ghosts and ghouls as human imposters in 1969. Of course, a bedsheet ghost appeared in the show's opening titles. The tone of Scooby-Doo was appropriate for the period since many people believed that beliefs like bedsheet ghosts belong in the category of old-fashioned tomfoolery, along with other superstitions. The News and Observer of North Carolina stated on November 8, 1964, styles in ghosting are shifting. The traditional bedsheet ghosts that groan and flap their arms are becoming less common, as are the plain white things that appear suddenly in the dark and exclaim, "Boo!" These are disappearing, along with headless horsemen, basic haunted houses, and cemetery spirits. If the bedsheet ghost ever displayed one final terrible repugnance, it was in the BBC horror film Whistle and I'll Come to You from 1968. It had multiple instances when a sheet that appeared to be sentient was portrayed in a way that was genuinely scary. Since then, The Conjuring 2013, which delivered a true shock by having a single sheet hit an unidentified, unseen corpse, has been the closest we've gotten to that. Nowadays, bedsheet ghosts are more likely to be found on Etsy as beautiful little accents for clothing, home goods, and candles. But now that it's Halloween, it's important to recall who the bedsheet ghosts originally were and what they stood for. In any case, you never know when the spooky ones could return.